Most of the advice that we see online completely overcomplicates self-improvement and exactly what it is you need to do in order to overcome any bad habit and introduce some good habits into your life. There's a lot of noise online, and as a young man who's trying to completely change the trajectory of his life, it can be hard to know exactly what to listen to. Lots of things sound good, but when you put it into practice, it doesn't really work, or it doesn't work for as long as you need it to. And then you see some people say one thing, some people say another, and at the end of the day, you just don't know what to listen to. Now, in the next 10 to 20 minutes, I'm going to be showing you exactly how simple it can be in order to completely transform the trajectory of your life for good, and to completely remove any bad habit that you currently have that's been holding you back. And not only how simple it is, but just how you can get it done within the next 4 weeks. If you're new to the channel, hello, my name is Christian. I've been helping young men break free from the bad habits for the past 3 or so years now. Before that, I was able to conquer my own bad habits. I'm now over 100 days porn free, and I record these videos because I enjoy them. So the first thing I'm going to explain is there is a difference between simple and easy. So when I say simple, simple just means it's easy to understand. You don't have to think really hard about it. But most of the things that are simple, it doesn't always mean that it's very easy to do. So the knowledge I'm going to give you today is going to make it very simple to understand in order how to change your life. You'll know exactly what you need to do, and it's just one thing you need to do. But that one thing to do isn't just going to happen like that. It's not going to be a piece of cake. But my intention at the end of this video is you're going to know crystal clear what you need to do in order to change your life within 4 weeks. So the first thing to understand, very simply, is the difference between what is known as a delayed and an instant gratification activity. And basically, I'll explain it like this. You might have heard of these terms before, but an instant gratification activity is an activity that feels good when you're doing it, you feel shit afterwards. A delayed gratification activity is it's usually hard whilst you're doing it, but you feel really good afterwards. So an example of instant gratification could be scrolling on your phone for 4 hours. You feel you're having fun whilst you're doing it, but afterwards you feel like a piece of shit because you've just wasted 4 hours. But delayed gratification activity is something such as a cold shower or going to the gym, which whilst you're doing them, they suck. You know, a cold shower hurts. It sucks. No one wants to do it. But afterwards, how do you feel? You feel absolutely invisible. You feel absolutely invincible. You feel like you can conquer the world. So that's what a delayed and an instant gratification activity is. It's basically, a delayed gratification activity is doing good things for your future self. And an instant gratification activity is doing bad things for your future self, or you're doing bad things for your progress. It feels good whilst you're doing it, but you feel shit afterwards. So I'm going to draw a graph. There'll be two graphs here. Let's say up here is pleasure. PL is pleasure, down here is pain. And it's the same for this graph over here. An instant gratification, and then we got delayed gratification. An instant gratification activity is you feel good whilst you're doing it, but you dip or you have a bit of a crash afterwards. You feel bad afterwards. So you feel pleasure whilst you're doing it, and then you feel some level of suffering or pain afterwards. Because either you feel like shit or you have a come down, whether you're having a big night out or you're partying. We've all experienced these things before. And then delayed is just the opposite. It feels very hard. The workout, you need a lot of discipline to first get yourself to the gym. And then the workout itself, it's painful because you're hurting your muscles. You're literally breaking your muscles. But then afterwards, you feel good. And then you get those endorphins. And, you've got this, you had a dip in pain, but now you have an increase in pleasure. Whereas the opposite is you had an increase in pleasure, but now you're in pain afterwards. And life sucks. So that's the difference between an instant and delayed gratification activity. Now, if we draw a bigger graph, a larger graph, I'm just basically going to draw most of our typical days. So we'll wake up, we'll touch our phone, which can be quite pleasurable. We'll open up, we might check our messages. So that gives us some pleasure, but then we dip down into pain, which means now we start seeking more pleasure because we're down here in pain. So we want to alleviate the pain by finding more pleasure. So now we might scroll on TikTok or something for 3 hours. So we get more pleasure. We go down to pain, and then we might play video games because we're seeking more pleasure. We go down into pain. Then we might goon or whatever. And then we're just in this downward spiral. And then not only is this just what happens over the course of a day, but this is just basically what most of our lives feel like on default, where we chase so much pleasure that we're just by default below, let's just say this is baseline, above here is pleasure, below here is pain. Most of us just by default 24/7 are in this lower half of the graph. We're in pain most of the time, where the pleasurable things we do, they're not even giving us pleasure. They're just making us feel less pain. And this is also the reason why, something such as depression, which is basically where you're just down here, or even just our generation. You know how, it's a bit of a meme, but it's very true how our generation were quite weak compared to our parents' generation, even our grandparents' generation who were in wars and things like that, where, there's a meme that, your grandfather was fighting in a war and then our generation complains about being oppressed or offended or something like that. You know why? The reason why that is, like a scientific reason, as fucked as it is, and I'm not condoning it. This is just an explanation. I'm not saying it's normal. I'm not saying it should be normal, but because we chase so much pleasure, or because life today is so pleasurable, pleasure is so instantly accessible compared to what it was 100 years ago. And think about this, like 100 years ago, in order to see some titties, you had to dress up nicely, go out once a weekend, be probably very good at dancing, have very good pickup skills, have very good pickup artistry skills, and you could get the potential to maybe see some chicks. But now you just go on your phone, pleasure right there, and it's arguably 10 times better. Like, don't lie to yourself about, like, we can all agree that that's true. It's 10 times better, or it feels 10 times better. But because we're down here by default, normal things such as even getting out of bed just feel even more painful than it would if you're up here, such as, your grandparents or whatever up here, where getting out of bed doesn't really take much suffering in order to do because they're already above baseline compared to us. So that's just a fun fact. So now we're basically just chasing pleasure to feel less pain, and normal things just feel more painful by default. But the fun thing is even the opposite is true. So if your life is stacked to difficulty, such as you're having cold showers every day, you're going to the gym every day, you're literally sitting down to work every day and work hard every day, whatever it is, whatever these things might be, is the opposite is true, where it'll end up looking like that because you're essentially avoiding pain. You're avoiding pleasure, which you could say you're chasing pain. And chasing pain, which means you're by default on the side of pleasure, which also means, very cool thing is, you're more resilient because painful things, let's say there's a painful experience in your life, such as a breakup or you lose a family member, something very tragic. It still feels painful, but it might not feel as painful as opposed to if by default you're down here. So this explains something I mentioned in another video of mine, which is why I'm only spending 3 minutes or 2 minutes on this part of the video, where chasing basically a life where you're chasing pleasure leads to a life of pain, whereas a life where you're chasing pain leads to a life of more pleasure or more fulfillment. A more difficult life leads to a more fulfilling life, especially when you're the one orchestrating that difficulty, such as you're intentionally going to the gym, you're intentionally having cold showers, you're intentionally doing hard things that are difficult, things that are uncomfortable. You're getting out of your comfort zone. You're starting conversations with strangers or things along those lines, which are just weird, uncomfortable, but long-term, but they have a long-term game. Short-term pain, long-term gain versus short-term pleasure, long-term pain. So that's the difference. Now, there's this chemical in your brain known as dopamine. You've probably heard of it before. And basically this chemical, its job in the brain is basically to motivate you to do things that it believes is important for survival. So if you didn't have dopamine in your brain, you wouldn't be motivated to eat. And they've done a study on rats where they removed the dopamine from the brain. They put the food right in front of them and they starved to death because they had no dopamine to tell them, hey, you have to eat this because it's necessary for survival. And very simply, as I said, I have a whole video explaining this, but I'll just cover this very simply. Your brain will always prioritize the thing that gives the most pleasure with the least amount of effort, which is why at the moment it's probably much easier or much more motivating for you to go on Pornhub than it is for you to actually go out and meet a girl, because this takes much less effort. It actually gives you probably much more pleasure because you can see 100 girls in the span of 10 minutes. And it takes little effort compared to this takes a lot of effort, and maybe it's even not as pleasurable. So the goal for us is to reverse this to the point where this becomes pleasurable, to the point where we don't need this anymore. And I'm going to tell you, you can do this within 4 weeks. And it's actually very simple, but it's not very easy to do. It's very simple, but it's not very easy to do. But if you do want to completely change the trajectory of your life forever, this is a mandatory 4-week period that you do have to go through. And this 4-week period is what this 4-week period is what is known as a dopamine detox. A dopamine detox. And a dopamine detox is basically where you go cold turkey, you cut out all of those instant gratification activities for 4 weeks. And let me explain to you exactly why that's the case. Now, this is something I learned from someone known as Dr. Anna Lemke. She actually has a really good episode on Diary of a CEO. I highly recommend you watch that. And she's done a bunch of studies, and she also helps people overcome addiction, obviously to a much greater degree than I do. And she's worked with hundreds of patients. So she not only has done studies, but she has hands-on experience with this, also in her own life as well. But remember this graph that we drew before, which is probably just our life, where we look like this. Now, she's discovered, and other studies as well, that it takes around 4 weeks for you to basically go back to baseline, where you're no longer in this pain side of the graph anymore. And it doesn't mean you're in pleasure, but you're just at baseline, which means you're just neutral so far. And it takes around a 4-week period, sometimes 5 for more people, sometimes 3 for others, but on average it's a 4-week period to achieve that point. Because an interesting thing when it comes to dopamine is when you do one of those instant gratification activities, okay, you get that spike in pleasure. It's like a sugar spike, but then you have that crash. And the reason why it crashes is because we can just picture it very quickly as a set of scales. So let's say it's a set of scales like that. That's a scale. And on one side there's pleasure, on the other side there's pain. If you do something that's very pleasurable, your brain pretty much likes everything to be stable in your body, including these scales. So it wants these scales to be level at all time. If you do something pleasurable, then the scales are going to, look like that. So let's say you loaded pleasure on this side of the scales, your pleasure is going to go up, which means if you look at the scales, it's going to look down and then this will go up. But the pain side will go up. So your body wants to balance it out. So what does it do? It pushes down on the pain side to level so that it becomes level, so that the scales become level again. But it doesn't stop there. So what it does is it will actually overshoot slightly. And this is what you will call the crash, or the cravings you would have, or the post-nut clarity, where you have that temporary dip in pleasure. You go into pain temporarily. But what most of us don't realize, because we're impulsive fucks and we're not patient, is if you wait a while, your body will naturally just even out the scales, because as I said, your body wants those scales to be even. So there'll be a shoot of pleasure, and then there'll be a shoot of pain, but it will go a little bit over the pain a little bit. It will overshoot slightly, but then slowly it'll level itself back out. And basically, this dopamine detox period, this 4-week period, so 4 weeks, is basically we are so overshot when it comes to our pain that your body naturally does want to return you to baseline. And if you just let it, if you just be patient and you don't, and you avoid instant gratification activities for a 4-week period, it will come back to baseline. Which means if you stack basically removing pleasure or removing all these instant gratification activities, or just sustaining from them for a short period of time, and you also stack on top of it seeking out painful things, not only will you be returning back to baseline, but you'll also be stacking the graph in your favor, where you're going back up to baseline even quicker, which is quite cool. And I can tell you this is 100% true, because I've done these a few periods of my life, and I've also done them with the guys I work with and with the people I work with, and it works. It absolutely works. So it absolutely works. And the guys, they all love it. We hate it whilst we're doing it, but afterwards we love it, which is basically the key to delayed gratification. So let me walk you through this 4-week period. And I'm just going to tell you straight up that this is not going to be easy. As I said, it's very simple. The simple thing is you abstain from instant gratification for 4 weeks. And an easy way to do that, and to make it a little bit easier for you, is you increase the amount of delayed gratification activities you do for those 4 weeks. So you go cold turkey, very hard, very strict for 4 weeks. And I'm going to just be very upfront with you right now. This is going to be very hard, and it is going to suck. you're going to suffer through this. But let me ask you a question. Will you suffer for 4 weeks? 4 weeks of your life. Are you willing to suffer for 4 weeks of your life in order to change the trajectory of your life for good? Are you willing to go through that 4 weeks of suffering? Are you willing to suffer for 4 weeks? Or would you rather suffer in mediocrity for the next 40 years of your life? That is your decision to make. Because no matter what you choose in life, everything you do in life will always come with a level of suffering. You cannot avoid suffering. Let's say you're walking along a path and you come to a crossroads where you can either go left or you can go right. So you can either go left or you can go right. So you have two options. And let's say the options in your life is you either go, for example, like porn free, or you keep watching, OnlyFans models for example. Like you're addicted to porn, or you try to really quit porn. Like both of those paths have suffering. This obviously has a lot of suffering because you've been trying to do it, and maybe you've overcome that one, so you know how painful it is. But it comes with a lot of suffering because you fail a lot, and it's very hard to do. And as a guy, you get hard and you can't do anything about it. So that's just painful and it's weird, and you don't know what to do about that. This sucks. This is very hard to do, and it takes a lot of discipline, and you fail a lot. And there's a lot of pain in this because it forces you to really face yourself and question yourself. But on the other side, even though this is quite pleasurable, there's a lot of pain in this because how do you feel after scrolling on Pornhub or watching an OnlyFans girl for an hour or whatever? I feel like a complete loser. You feel like an absolute complete loser. And because of that, and because you feel like a loser, and because you're probably a bit creepy, you're probably never going to actually be able to have a really good connection with a real woman. And that's going to come with a lot of suffering. So at the end of the day, whenever you come to a crossroads, the thing that should help you make a decision isn't, which one would be more pleasurable? It's which suffering or which pain am I willing to go through? Which pain would I rather go through? Because both of these things give you pleasure. Both of these things give you pleasure, but both of them give pain, but they give different pain. So you need to ask yourself, which pain are you willing to go through? So I'm going to ask you right now, are you the type of person who would rather suffer through short-term pain? Are you the type of person who would rather suffer through long-term pain? Are you the person who would rather suffer through the pains of addiction and being a loser? Or would you rather go through the suffering, even the short-term suffering, of developing complete self-control over your life and changing it completely? I can't answer that question for you. Now, if you're still watching this video, that means you've decided to go through the suffering of becoming a person with self-control. So, which means you have to go through this 4-week period. And I'm going to map out exactly what those 4 weeks will look like. So let's say we have this graph again, and perhaps by default, so we got pleasure up here, pain down there. And perhaps by default, you're just down here by default. Starting line is here. This is where you're starting, and this is baseline. So for the first 2 weeks, it is going to suck. And I don't just know it's going to suck because I heard a podcast on it or something. I know it's going to suck because I've done this before. And as I said, I've done this with the guys I work with. We've done it together as well. I didn't just get them to do it, but I've done it with them. I did it with them. And this was one of the most painful, boring as well, and just uncomfortable periods of my life. It was one of the biggest uncomfortable periods of my life because here's what happens. For those 2 weeks, you actually don't move. You stay here. You stay at the baseline. But here's what's also happening. Because you're not chasing pleasure, because you're not doing any instant gratification activities, at least you're not going down. So you're not going down, but you're not going up. But you're staying here, which means that whatever pain you avoiding, I'm going to teach you something real quickly. Usually when we go and seek pleasure, such as we go and scroll on our phone, or we go and take drugs, for example, we smoke weed, or we go and subscribe to another OnlyFans channel or whatever it is, or account, I think. I'm not sure what they're called. But the reason why is because we're trying to seek pleasure in order to avoid a pain, which means that when you remove the pleasure, what's going to happen? You're going to be forced to face the pain that you were avoiding this whole time, which means that for 2 weeks, you're going to be feeling all this pain you're going to be avoiding, because maybe you went through a breakup 2 years ago and nonstop since then, you've been partying, you've been going out, you've been video gaming, you've been scrolling on your phone, and you haven't taken a second to just sit and be. Because maybe sitting in silence is the most uncomfortable and the most painful thing for you to do. You can't sit in silence for 2 minutes without grabbing your phone. You can't sit down and do nothing for 3 minutes or 3 seconds, 2 seconds without getting hits of dopamine from junk food, from scrolling on your phone, from doing whatever. Like maybe you're even going to the point that when you're eating lunch, you're maybe having a high sugary lunch, and your phone is on, you've got headphones on, you're listening to music, you're scrolling through TikTok as well, and the only thing you're watching on TikTok, the only thing that really grabs your attention are videos where someone's explaining something, but in order for you to concentrate, someone has to be playing Subway Surfer or Minecraft on the bottom half of the screen. That is because your body's just so used to chasing pleasure. Why? Because you've been trying to avoid that pain of maybe that breakup you went through 2 years ago, or things that happened to you when you were growing up, or whatever it might be. Which does mean, and I'm preparing you for this mentally, that when you go through this mandatory period of 4 weeks, because you have just told me, you have just told yourself as well, that you are willing to go through the suffering of just 4 weeks to overcome this, you're going to be hit with all these things. Now, I won't have time in this video to explain exactly how to deal with them, but I will make another video on that, because I don't want to just leave you with that. I do want to make sure you have all the tools you need in order to overcome that. And that goes into, I'll just explain quickly. There's 4 factors that I talk about when it comes to overcoming any bad habit. There's your mental, your emotional, your chemical, and environmental. Your mental is basically what you think about yourself, your past, and all these. It's just basically your thoughts. So your David Goggins type of stuff where you have to develop a really strong mindset. Your chemical is basically what we're talking about here, where we're talking about dopamine, where you're optimizing your chemical to where you crave this more than you crave this. Environmental, put simply, is the people and the places that you spend the most time, the people you spend the most time with, the places you go to the most, and the things around you the most. So you've probably heard the quote that you're the average of the 5 people you hang around the most. So if you're going to the bar 3 times a week with a bunch of losers, it's going to be impossible for you to stop drinking, for example. And then the final one is emotional, which ties a lot into mental as well, which is basically where you learn how to deal with pain, so that pain doesn't cause you to chasing pleasure all the time. Basically, you learn how to stay resilient and like a rock, like a center, like these, you probably have some role models, some people you look up to. Maybe it's someone like Jocko Willink, or maybe you think about, the great Stoics, the Roman Empire, and these great emperors or men of the past, and how they were very stoic and they had just very strong wills or very strong mindsets. That all goes down to mental and emotional, which I'll cover in another episode. So going back to the 2 weeks. So these 2 weeks are going to suck because you're not moving. And in these 2 weeks, I'm just going to tell you, you're going to experience withdrawal symptoms. You're going to experience withdrawal symptoms. And the withdrawal symptoms you will feel are going to be the same for everyone. And this is the same for if you quit any bad habit, and you're going to know, and this is true because you've experienced this, because you've likely gone through periods of your life where you've tried to cut out junk food or sugar because you're trying to improve your physique, or you've tried to cut out drinking, or you've tried to stop watching porn. And once you stop it, those first 2 weeks, they suck. Those first 2 weeks, they absolutely suck. That's because no matter when you cut out anything, no matter when you cut out absolutely anything in your life, or you just change something in your life, your body will take 2 to 4 weeks to adjust. And those first 2 weeks will always suck, because that's when you will experience withdrawal symptoms, no matter what it is. And those are things such as you'll just be very restless. You'll feel very restless. You'll feel very anxious. You'll feel very impulsive. You'll likely feel very angry. You'll also feel very sad. All these emotions and all these feelings you likely do not want to feel. That's just probably how you're going to feel in those first 2 weeks. You'll have very high cravings. You'll be craving this thing nonstop. You'll be craving it like a junkie. Like, this is what you're going to experience in those first 2 weeks. Huge cravings, huge withdrawal symptoms, and you'll be feeling the same pain. So those are weeks 1 to 2. Now weeks 3 and weeks 4. What happens? So once you've crossed those 2 weeks, what happens in weeks 3 and 4 is that's when you start going up to baseline. So from weeks 3 to weeks 4, so including by the end of week 4, you're not going to be feeling pleasure, but you will start feeling less pain. So your cravings will get less. They won't go away, but they'll get less. Your pain won't go away, but it'll get easier. It'll get slightly less. You'll be in slightly less pain than you were through weeks 1 and 2. And by the end of week 4, going into week 5, that is when you should go into baseline. That is when you should reach baseline, where just life by default starts feeling okay. It starts feeling pleasurable because you're not down here all the time. Normal things such as needing to wake up in the morning won't be as painful. It will just be something that you do. Now, you might still need some discipline, but it won't be as painful. And then, as I said, when you're doing this dopamine detox, if you stack this, which is basically you just allow yourself to be bored for 4 weeks. That's putting it as simply as possible. You allow yourself to be bored for 4 weeks whilst also doing some delayed gratification activities. That is when your life starts doing this. And as I said, it's super simple to understand. Hard to do, simple to understand. But it only takes 4 weeks. And that is all you need. Now, if you want a really practical way to set this up, what I would recommend you do is just think about your typical week and your typical day, and maybe just list out and think about all the things that bring you pleasure. Think about all the things that bring you pleasure. And you can go as extreme as you want. But if you only want to ever have to do this really once, go extreme. Because I've done it, because as I said, with the guys I worked with, the guys who saw the best results are the guys who went completely extreme, and we did it together. And I looked over their list and I said, no, this isn't extreme enough. You need to go harder. You need to go harder. And they're the ones who saw the biggest results. The guys who just removed 3 or 4 things and made their lives a little bit easier and kept a little bit of pleasure. Maybe, okay, I could eat junk food once a week throughout these 4 weeks, or I could watch a movie 3 times a week if I do all my work or something like that. They're the ones who at the end of the 4 weeks were still down here. Because what happens is you will just relapse. You're in this loop. So I'd recommend go extreme. And the way to do that is you go 4 weeks extreme. It's all it is. As we said, it's 4 weeks extreme for lifelong gain. Lifelong gain. 4 weeks. Are you willing to sacrifice 4 weeks for lifelong gain? Yes, you are, because you're still watching this video. So what you do is you just go through your week. Anything that is pleasurable, anything that is a delayed gratification activity, you write it down. Like, get to the point where you write down warm showers are pleasurable. Eating this meal is pleasurable. Scrolling on your phone, obviously, those things are the things, and obviously you write down the things that are obvious, which are all the instant gratification activities, such as scrolling on your phone, watching TikTok all day, playing video games, watching Netflix till 3 a.m. at night, or just watching Netflix default, or watching Netflix full stop. You write those down, but also think about all the other things that are pleasurable. Now we remove them. And to make it a bit easier for you, we also need to think about, okay, what are the things that are hard that maybe also do give us a bit of pleasure afterwards, such as going to the gym, such as going to a cold shower, these delayed gratification activities. Whilst we're stopping doing these, we do also want to make sure we're replacing this time, because we're likely saving a lot of time by removing a lot of things that we do. We can replace it with things. So replace it with those delayed gratification activities, such as the gym, such as a cold shower or cold exposure, because what's something that's pleasurable? Warm water. So every shower you have is cold, for example. The last thing I'd recommend is you would build what's known as a habit tracker, which is basically just a graph. You can even do it on a whiteboard, a piece of paper. You can do it on your laptop, literally whatever works for you. If you're a bit of a nerd, make a Google spreadsheet or something. And down here, you write the habits, the things you do want to do and the things you don't want to do. So maybe in here is like no porn, no FAP. Maybe in here is no sugar. maybe in here is gym, and then up here you have like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So you do this for 4 weeks. You do it 4 weeks across, and then you just track. You just tick it off once you've done it. And obviously these ones, the ones where you're not going to do it for the day, you tick it the next day, because you only know if you succeeded once you wake up in the morning. You only know if you succeeded at not gooning once you wake up in the morning, because you could relapse once you go to bed because you're a horny fuck. Because here's an interesting statistic. Your progress in whatever you do, this doesn't just apply to breaking a bad habit or self-improvement, but your progress in life increases. You get a 70% boost in progress when you track your progress, because your brain's thinking about it all the time. So track your progress. Good way to do that is a habit tracker. Now, in the link of the description, you'll be able to find a free habit tracker if you wish to use one. There'll be a bunch of links down there. There'll be a link to access my Discord community, my Discord server, completely for free. All the guys I work with, we're all in this Discord server, as well as all of you who watch my content who have joined the server. It's a free community. It's a free community for guys who are on self-improvement, who are trying to break these bad habits and at the end of the day, completely change the trajectory of your life for good. So this is a perfect place for you to be if you're a young man on self-improvement, not only trying to break a bad habit or trying to change the trajectory of your life, but also trying to find other dudes who are doing the same, because in today's society, it's very hard to find people like that. So down in the link in the description, you'll be able to find that. You'll be able to find a bunch of other free resources, and there will also be opportunities down there that you can look at if you would like to fast track your progress in order to overcome this, or you would like to learn even quicker how to deal with, as I said, that emotional and that mental side of things. I can guide you through it one-on-one, because it's much easier to do that when you have someone guiding you through that. And I understand not everyone wants to do that, or not everyone needs to do that, and not everyone's ready for that. But basically down in the description, you'll be able to find some resources that are free, such as a free habit tracker, as well as some other things I paid if you wish to fast track your progress. Now, the links down there will basically just depend on when it is you're watching this video. They might be individually laid out where this is the habit tracker, this is that, or it might just be one link that sends you to everything, such as it might just send you to my Discord community where you will find all this stuff for free. And I'll walk you through exactly where to find those. So thank you for watching this video. You now understand exactly how simple it is in order to completely change the trajectory of your life for good. It only takes 4 weeks of complete iron hard discipline. That's all you need. 4 weeks. You don't need any other special hacks. It's just 4 weeks of discipline, of suffering, of pain for long-term gain. Are you willing to go through it?